Good afternoon, and welcome to The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom with Mark. Whoops. Excuse me, the old microphone's playing up a little bit. Someone's left us so loud it nearly blew my ears out. Happens sometimes. Well, unfortunately I wasn't able to do my last show last year. My useless new car broke down, so we had to skip it. So I wasn't able to offer you a happy Christmas and a happy New Year. I hope you all had a very safe and enjoyable Christmas. I know there were a few people that didn't make it through, and I always think about those people, and I think how very sad it is. And, you know, I watch people's behaviour a lot, and I think, yeah, isn't it a real shame that sometimes people can't be a little bit more sensible and, you know, do stupid things on the roads and kill other people in a time when we should all be happy and celebrating together. And it breaks my heart when I hear of the terrible statistics that we have. And at the end of the day, there is no one else that can really solve that problem for us. We have to look after ourselves. And in so doing, if we can talk about it rather than just shuffle it away, you know, probably the most annoying term that I ever hear from people is not my problem. You know, when people turn their backs on problems, the problems don't go away. It exacerbates them because nothing is done. And if nothing is done, then rot continues. Now, the way that we Kiwis tend to deal with problems is we hold both whip and carrot, one in each hand. At first, with the left, we offer the carrot. This is what we'd like you to do. This is what you must do. This is what you have to do. You're told. And then immediately afterwards, you're threatened with a whip. If you don't comply, then you will be punished, most severely in this way. Now, weirdly enough, that doesn't work. It never did and it never will. There have been revolutions, namely the French and the Russian, were brought on by that kind of behaviour. The mob put up with it only for so long, and when it became too extreme, they rose up and removed the heads of all of those who were holding the whips. It's happened before in history, and it will only ever happen again. The whip only works if the dog fears you. Once the dog doesn't fear you anymore, he'll bite you, and he'll do it again and again and again, because he has no respect for you. You only have control as long as he fears the whip. Now, people like me have never feared the whip. Doesn't matter how much you beat me, it's never going to change me. I'm a good person because I choose to be so, and that is the difference, and the carrot is what we need. Our country suffers from an enormous number of problems and challenges. Things like wilding pine are going absolutely mental down south. Hundreds of thousands of these bloody things destroying our forests, our pine forests even. The Monterey pine does not like wilding too much at all. There are wallabies now starting to invade our country. It is an absolute crisis. They will destroy the bush, and they are establishing themselves just as the possums did. The possums were introduced again and again and again to ensure their survival. There were at least 6 major introductions in the early days of those animals to try and establish some kind of fur trade. Of course, we know what a disaster it was. There are something like 80 million possums ravaging our forests now, and many of them have been devastated. I've walked in national parks where there is not a single bird to be heard. Rats, mice, possums, ferrets, weasels, stoats, hedgehogs, you name it, they're destroying the bush. Now, I am very, very, very encouraged by the young people of today, by our government of today, who are doing a lot of great things. Just recently I heard down in Wellington on the Miramar Peninsula, they're attempting to make that area pest-free. and they have eradicated an enormous number of pests. The last few percent will be so very, very difficult to remove. Half of their efforts will probably go to removing the last 1 or 2% of the pests that are there, but boy are those birds coming back like you wouldn't believe. And it is extremely heartening to see that these things can happen, but it will never be done properly unless we pour an enormous amount of resources towards that, and these are resources we simply don't have. Volunteers won't do the job. They won't cut the mustard, and invasive species will destroy our forests. So something needs to be done. So what do? What's the solution? Well, it's really quite simple. All of the so-called criminals in our country need to be reformed, and by reformed I mean they need the carrot. They need to be encouraged, not forced labour. But every young man who wants to make a difference in their country can be reformed, removed from all the other criminals around them so that they're not a bad influence on them. I'm not saying that we can save every single criminal in this country. Some of them are hardened, bitter, nasty, evil people who are beyond redemption. But there are many, many, many young men and women who go into the system and are capable of being reformed. Now, how does this relate to my program? Well, I guarantee you that incarceration, locking someone in a cage, is not good for their state of mind. Associating with criminals, with gangs, living in a world of drugs and theft and violence only destroys the mental health of our young men and women. It makes them corrupt, not just in the way they act. It blackens their souls. It makes them less than what they could be. All of this violence, crime, drugs, nastiness only erodes our society, and these people are potentially very fine young people who just need to be steered in the right direction. All of their lives they've been told they're useless, they're nothing. You know, they've been put down, and that's why these young people go out and steal cars, because they know they'll never afford them. They know they'll never have great jobs. You know, so many doors are closed, and they feel it, they know it. They might not be able to express it in words, but they know that they are less than everybody else. That is wrong. You know it, I know it. So what we need to do is say, hey, there is an opportunity for you not only to have a good paying job, but to do something to help our country. And once you open their eyes to another path, open their hearts, open their minds, they can become good citizens. And with their success, they will encourage others. You know, we shouldn't have to wait until these people get married and have children and get old and then give up all this crime shit because they realise there's no future in it and it's only going to destroy their relationships and their families. I've seen a lot of older guys come out of the back end of gangs and say, hey, this is all bullshit and we don't need this and this is nonsense. Mate, they've spent decades of doing crime. If we catch them at the beginning and help these people, don't force them. Help them, open their eyes and their hearts. Then we can turn around these people and we can drop the amount of damage done, the amount of mental health problems that we have in this country, simply by helping these people to become better people. Sometimes what they need is good leadership. You will never get good followers if you don't have good leadership. Poor leadership leads to poor followers. And that is where we are falling down. We expect everyone to make their own way in life, to follow or to fail. There's no future in that. We need to educate young people. And, you know, the Dunedin study has shown us exactly where the problems occur. And they occur so very early in life. In the first 5 years of life, someone's future is very close to being determined, there is still a chance of averting disaster at that point, but unless it's addressed immediately and continuously through the rest of their young years, the chances of them failing themselves, society, becoming criminals, having terrible relationships, and all of the damage that's done as a result, that is most likely to occur. In fact, it is almost absolutely certain to occur unless something is done to address it. Now, I believe that all of us are equal in this country, regardless of colour, creed, or any other damn thing. And we all have the same rights. We have a right to be treated well. We run on a system of success and failure. You pass your exams, you're a success. You don't, you're a failure, and you're thrown to the bloody gutter. And why? Because we're stupid, that's why. We keep doing the same old stupid thing over and over and over again because that's the way. It's always been done that way. Why should we do it any other way? Well, what I'm saying to you is when it comes to mental health and crime, which is always associated with that, an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of reform. It's all about catching people early and saying to them, hey, there is another way. You can have a better life and you can be much happier as a person, and everyone else around you will be happier. And this is how we address the situation. And we really only need to concentrate on about 4% of the population that commits 50% of the crime. Don't believe me? Ask Uncle Google. It is a fact. 4% of our population are involved in 50% of the violent crime in our country. It is meted out on only a few people. And those people can be saved without an enormous amount of effort. If you look at how much it costs to pick up the wreck at the bottom of the cliff, it costs far more than to stop it from going over the top in the first place. 10 times more picking up the pieces than making these people's lives good. And success breeds success. You know, young people who find a way to be positive. Now, we have to think outside the box. We have to look at individuals and say, okay, what do we need to do with this person, and see them as a person, not a problem. And that's how things can be reformed. All right, before I rock on too much, I've got to get on with today's story. This is a beauty. This is the first story I ever wrote for this series. I've done 14 stories now. And this was inspired by a friend of mine, Stu McNeil. Initially, I didn't use his name, but I have changed it now so that I can give a copy to Stewie, and it brings back some great memories. This is a hunting story, and it's called The Dog's Day. It has been said that dogs live with determination. Never is that more true than in a hunting dog. The old mate, Stu, woke me about 4 a.m. The air was cool as we geared up for a hunt. Stu's Winchester 30-30 lever action felt cold and heavy, but its advantages of being short so as not to catch on branches and its mule-like kick made it essential for our adventure. Spare bullets, a sticking knife, and some twine rounded out the kit. We were travelling particularly light for this trip, and I felt like a passenger as I pulled on my boots and shouldered the 30-30. Stu chose 4 dogs from the kennels, all of them making a terrible racket as their time grew close, the excitement palpable. They stank but were fit to burst, rushing around yet staying very near to Stu, their master. The dogs' loyalty to Stu unquestioned, despite the indifferent attitude shown towards them. Orders were curt and short as we made for the quad bike, and the dogs came to join us. Stu kicked the motor over. I sat side saddle on the mudguard and pinned myself in by bracing my legs against the front. The dogs all tried to jump up on the back tray, but could not fit, and tussled amongst themselves in a game of King of the Castle. No bites or fangs, as they were happy enough to jog alongside as we slowly pulled away, down the drive and up the first incline, through some gates, and we were into the bush. Suddenly the attitude of the dogs changed to become more quiet and confidently intense. In the cool of the morning, the stars slowly began to disappear, still a little dark when we picked up first sign. Rutted soil so fresh, even we could smell it, and shit the size of a Coke can, which is where our name for them came from. The spoor of a big tusker boar, the top prize in pig hunting, which had already passed by. The two lightest dogs, our finders, showed some interest and quickly swept the gully in the next ridge, but quickly swung back. They understand the role required despite no orders. Havoc and Quinn are the finders, having the right smarts and light body type for the job. They are both mongrels, Havoc being dark and Quinn more grey in the coat, but nature seems to have mixed the best in them. The other two hanging back can find as well, but will act as bailers or holders today. They must stop the pig and hopefully give it a good stretch. Their names are Bob and Meg, both dark. Bob is the oldest and must prove it. Meg is the youngest and must prove herself worthy to stay. The bush we are passing is treacherously steep, and I am grateful for the quad bike, despite the noise and discomfort. We travel some 10 kilometres along a fire break, then park it up. At first the silence is overwhelming. The air so clear, the sun's first rays play tricks with it. I stare up, my mouth agape at this wonder, and Stu smiles knowingly. "Come on," is all he says, and begins along the fire break. The dogs quickly fall into line, two left, two right, and I bring up the rear with the rifle. Up and down, up and down. The further we walk, the more I have second thoughts about today. For I have a specific task too. My job is to tip the pig up by grabbing its hind legs so it can be stuck or dispatched with a knife. Once the beast is gutted, my job is then to carry it on back to the quad bike. I have been designated the bearer, so the further we go, the longer my return. We come across more fresh sign, and the finders quickly fan out and down into sweeping runs. I can hear them crashing through the bush occasionally, when abated silence as we wait for the anticipated bark, as one of the finders catches sight of his quarry. In these hundreds of hectares of regenerating native bush Stu lives on, he has introduced many pigs. The trophies of many boars' jawbones, including hooks, are nailed up all around Stu's place. I have little doubt of our success, but I feel some trepidation as we distance ourselves from transport. So far nothing, and the sun has risen. I feel its warmth, despite it only being a little after dawn. The blue sky promises a blistering hot day where scent and trail will disappear as the pigs seek shade and water further down the gullies. The dogs have been gone a little while, tracking a mob of pigs. From the tracks, one big boar, a bunch of females and some young. If sprung, the cunning boar will run uphill through the mob and sacrifice the young to save himself. A good dog will stay on the boar if possible, but in the ensuing chaos may have to choose a lesser prize. This is where a good dog shows his true quality. Be it God or nature, some special dogs like old Bob will stay on the biggest pig he alone can wrestle or bail. Hopefully by then the rest can close in and the bail proceed as planned. To this point they hunt silently, crossing and recrossing the track through the bush, working their way down the gully in pursuit. Stu and I wait silently, having a smoke and listening quietly for the first telltale bark. I sense the anticipation. Stu is like a coiled spring despite his quiet nature. Then suddenly it comes. a faint, high-pitched bark, which leaves us in no doubt. A finder has sprung the mob. More barking as the mob breaks. Moving around, it sounds like they are escaping, and we hesitate our pursuit. Then a second dog rings out nearby. We look at each other, then charge headlong through the bush. I am so pleased for the short rifle, as the going is tough through dense bush, but soon I find the bottom of the gully and the pig's tracks. Stu and I lose track of each other as the noise intensifies and a squeal breaks out. The pigs break and tear off down the gully as Stu and I regroup, then come across where the fight ensued. We wait for another bail or the dogs to return. Excitement and disappointment are tempered with relief as I realise what a haul it would have been from this place. Soon old Bob returns to us with blood on his face. It had been close, but the pigs managed to break downhill and escape. We'll try them again later, Stu informs me with casual confidence. Meg returns, so Stu wolf whistles for the others to return, and we slog our way back up to the top of the gully. By now there is real heat in the sun, but we push on with greater urgency as we lose the advantage of morning. Returning empty-handed is an option neither of us want to consider. More tracks, sign and sweeps as the sun begins to beat down and the cicada's song pulses almost as one great choir. After a few more kilometres we stop at the head of a large gully where a breeze rises from below. We strip down and lie in the scrub near the edge of the track. It offers a bit of a mattress and protection from the sun. Another wolf whistle brings the other two dogs up. Stu pulls out a pair of binoculars and scans the gully below, across this broad, sweeping opening. Before long, Stu spots a sow with young in tow across the other side, trot-trotting like little circus performers. We decide not to pursue, and the dogs seem happy to stay, lie around and sniff the breeze. These dogs are veterans and know not to exhaust themselves, preferring to lap at muddy puddles and lie around for a bit. They come to us for reassurance, the bush having cleaned them up a bit. We speak to them in low, soft tones, and although tense, they seem satisfied for a while. Stu and I trade a few tales while we wait, and I wander down to find water. The thick bush smells wonderful and the foliage cools the place nicely. So I return reassured our afternoon effort will not be beyond me. This gully opens wide and flattish, coated with various types of bush where pig and deer might hide. As the sun rises high, Stu decides to strike out again, this time to quietly follow the gully down to a natural wallow where the pigs might be holed up for the afternoon. We have the important advantage of staying upwind from them all of the way. The dogs noiselessly close in behind us as we look for tracks or sign. Before long we come across more rooted up soil and fresh droppings. The dogs show immediate interest. Havoc and Quinn break as if ordered and scoot off down the gully. Meg and Bob decide to follow, and we are not far behind, with Stu leading. Within minutes another bark breaks out, much closer to us, and Stu halts us both. Soon barking and growling evidences another bail, and we pursue. The mob break up the side of the gully, but the dogs stay on the job for a second bail and some bracken. We half swim through the bracken and fallen trees referred to as tiger country. We are so close, the last is a frustrating slog, and I come upon an unreal sight. Quinn and Havoc have bailed the longest pig I have ever seen. Through the snarls and mock charges, it slowly dawns on me that they have two big sows, back to back. Each of them is on ahead, and they mean business. The other two dogs have another pig further down, but we must concentrate on the sows, lest the dogs get bitten. The squealing and growling intensifies, but I am able to get through the bracken to tip the pig up. "Give me the gun," shouts Stu, and I respond quickly. Stu ploughs in, releasing the safety and shouting encouragement to the dogs as he goes. He knows a clean shot isn't possible. Only a hip shot will do in this situation, and he thumps off a shot. One of the sows break as both dogs set on the dying beast, and we swim into the sight of the kill and pull the dogs off with reassuring praise of "good boy." As I close in, the sow is still twitching, despite a clean heart-lung shot, the light of life slowly flickering out in her eyes. We go through the motions of tipping her up, sticking it through the heart. She is pregnant with piglets, so looks huge at first sight. "Yum, in pig sow," says Stu, as he guts our prey with ruthless efficiency. Having never eaten an in-pig sow, it means little to me at the time. We tie up the front legs of the carcass, and Stu helps lift it onto my back, its front legs over my shoulders, literally piggyback style. I start the slow march back to the top of the gully, and the carcass feels twice the estimated 50 kilos. Sweat begins to pour, and I immediately regret smoking. Doubts enter my mind as I look up to where we ascended from. My heart thumps its complaint at this exertion, but finally I finish the first pull and I collapse out onto the track. The animal's blood is poured down my back and legs, all warm and sticky. Gross as it is, I try to ignore it, as all four dogs emerge from the bush with Stu, who has a satisfied look on his face. "That'll be a good carry," he muses unhelpfully. I catch my breath and begin the carry proper. With every uphill pull, the air seems to get hotter and sweat pours off my nose. I dare not look up, but haul steady and constant. Stu can only make jokes and tease me, as this is a cakewalk in comparison to many he has had to endure. Still, there is a glimmer of sympathy in his voice as I slog through the heat. Finally, the quad bike comes into view, and I am exhausted by the constant haul, so I'm glad to be relieved of my burden. "Look at the state of you," laughs Stu. "Still, that was a good carry," he muses. "Even some fit guys struggle with that part." When we reach the house, I fetch a couple of cold drinks, while Stu hangs the beast and scorches the hair off with a gas torch. As the sun sets, a few friends gather, and we begin the feast of roast pork and potatoes with roast vegetables. The meat tastes like a mixture between mutton and pork. Delectable as promised, the banquet seems to quench my tiredness, but eventually I must to bed. The dogs are quiet all night with full bellies and the satisfaction of a job well done. Another adventure is just around the corner. The dogs seem to know it too. Well, that's me for another week. Gotta go. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoy your week, and I'll see you again next week. Bye for now.